everyone. I'm Kristen Ciccolini.
And I'm Janine Malone.
And you're listening to It's Just a Phase. Each week, we'll bring you inspiring and informative conversations about honoring the different cycles of life, covering topics of health and wellness, moon phases, astrology, witchcraft, feminism, and more, so you can superpower your well-being and live your best life. Hey, Janine.
Hi, Kristen.
Episode 3 now. I'm very excited.
Here we are. We did it. Three's a charm.
Well, we hope you all enjoyed the first couple episodes. Now we're going to be dropping them week to week. So this week, what questions are we trying to answer?
This week, we're talking about what cycles have to do with patriarchal oppression.
Everything.
Spoiler alert, every single thing. I'm so excited to dive into this. I'm a little primed and ready to just be like on my high horse about overthrowing the patriarchy. I have a big obsidian point that I got at House Witch called, I think that they call them the Hex the Patriarchy obsidian points. I'll put a photo on Instagram, just like trying to bring the vibe.
Well, my vibe was slamming the keyboard, writing down my notes here. So
yes, I'm really excited.
A little ragey doing that. But this episode is all about breaking the cycle of the patriarchy because it bleeds into every aspect of our life. So yeah, so what does all of this mean? So obviously men and women function differently, and this episode we're going to look at the emphasis our society has put on masculine hormone cycles and masculine energy, and we'll talk about how we can reclaim our feminine energy and work with that for a better flow in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just by understanding and learning more about our own bodies and our own, like the different kinds of energy, that in and of itself is pretty radical.
Yeah, I think so too. It's pretty, I like to look at it as rebellious.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll start with the sun and moon cycles. So this is really, I think this is foundational to all of this stuff. So masculine energy is more of the sun cycle, so solar cycles, which is the 24-hour cycle, the circadian rhythm. And men, their hormones, it's Groundhog Day every single day, their hormones, the way their arc goes, it just follows a 24-hour cycle. And society is built around that, right? We wake up every morning and we get our work done throughout the day. We wind down at night, and that's the normal rhythm that we all go through. And obviously that's just how we live our lives, but also business is set up for that, and so many other structures are set up for the male cycle, which we will dive way deeper into. But I know Janine has a tarot aspect to this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what's really interesting, and part of what led me to looking at cycles this way originally when I was working with the tarot, is understanding kind of like masculine and feminine energies completely outside of like gender norms or gender biases or even gender at all, but just kind of, the energies themselves and what they represent. So in tarot, the kind of archetypes that we can look at for masculine energy is this Emperor card. It's the fourth card in the major arcana. It's ruled by Aries, so it's like very, as we are familiar with, it can be misconstrued as being overpowering, really all about like basically pillaging and taking for ourselves, and like authoritarianism, which obviously is the masculine in its toxic form, as we've unfortunately become all too familiar with. But the Emperor in general, and the way that I tend to read it and tend to look at it, is this ability to kind of take up space, not in a matter of being in competition, but really in terms of our own personal development and our own growth. So again, being a leader, but how can we become embodied leaders rather than just, the billionaires and almost trillionaires of the world who exploit other people and industries and our natural resources for their gain. So the emperor for me has been a really powerful tool and card to work with, as I've quickly, as I may fall into even in this episode, can get very angry about our society's emphasis on this kind of way of being. But in reality, the emperor in and of itself and that masculine energy can be helpful in some instances. It's just the scales are tipped a little too far in that direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. There's so many examples of this in our society. Like you're talking about trillionaires. We know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. Shout out Jeff.
Fuck Jeff. But
Truly.
yeah. Yeah, and then so that is really the big emphasis in our society, and just so much of our world is focused on this type of energy. And we also have feminine energy, which is based, it's the lunar cycle, it's the 28-day cycle. And that matches up with our menstrual phase. So
Mm-hmm.
there's 4 phases of the moon, and there's also 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. And society is 100% not built for this.
Correct.
Yeah. So just like that same, that Groundhog Day effect, our bodies, people who menstruate, our bodies do not work in that way. It's not the same every single day. Our hormones, the arc is over 28 days, or the fluctuations are over that period. So we can live in a way that honors those fluctuations if we know how to do it. But our energy changes, our metabolism changes, our interests change, our brain power changes, and we don't know this. So this is known as the infradian rhythm, which is a term I learned from Alyssa Vitti. Shout out Alyssa, she's got some
Love
great
her.
books, Woman Code and The Flow, awesome books. But yeah, so we don't acknowledge this because it's, we don't, many people don't know about it because patriarchy. So
Right.
we resist it, maybe unknowingly, and just trying to fit into that box, and trying, just like ignoring those cycles, ignoring the fluctuations in our energy and our productivity and all that. It makes things worse, because it affects our happiness. Maybe we might be feeling less energy, but it might feel like depression because we don't realize that it's just a natural part of our cycle. It affects, obviously, our stress levels when we are trying to do the same thing day after day and we just don't feel the same day after day. And that's a cascade effect on our hormones too.
And so this, the feminine archetype of the tarot is the Empress. And so I've, had my own relationship with this card as well, in terms of the I always I always say to people, and maybe you'll relate to this, Kristen, like in theory, the Empress sounds amazing. Like when it shows up in a reading, it's about like Mother Earth and being receptive and being fertile and being this like, conduit for these like brilliant intuitive ideas and all these kind of, sounds amazing. But in practice, it's so opposite to the way that we've really been taught to value ourselves and kind of, um, even value the way that we're spending our time, in terms of, taking those periods of rest, being okay, being like a little bit more quiet, being accepting of, I always, think of the word receptivity with the Empress. And so if you think about, the last time someone paid you a compliment or wanted to, offer you money or advice or love, intimacy, and how hard it is for us to actually receive that. That's kind of what I think of primarily when the Empress comes up. But I also think that she's a beautiful representation of this kind of Mother Nature, right? In our first episode, we talked all about the cycle of the seasons, and she really is embodying them sort of all at once. And it's so different than this energy of the Emperor, which is like, you know, grow it, growing over time, where she's more, let's say, cyclical, I guess, to be in the same genre of this podcast, but she just is more, she evolves and she can adapt, and there's more ability to sort of be in receptivity and being in reaction rather than just being in constant motion, which I think, as you pointed out in talking about hormones, it's pretty obvious how that's not the way our system is built. There's not a lot of time built in for reflection and nuance and periods of rest sprinkled in amongst our periods of growth.
Yeah, and the word that comes to me when I think of the Empress is nurturing.
Mm,
And that's not a masculine energy at all, you know?
right.
So I think if you are trying to embody the Empress in some way and relate this to feminine energy, then nurturing is a really key word. And just thinking about what role that kind of word or that concept has in your life, and how can you nurture your mental health or your physical health, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so as you can see, this has everything to do with cycles, masculine energy being really linear and repeatable, and feminine energy focusing on cycles and being really adaptable.
Yeah, and I mean, ever since the Industrial Revolution, more and more emphasis has been put on this like 24-hour cycle as a means of production of the workday and the creation of the work week, and just the dependence on repeated and predictable output. Um, the patriarchy and capitalism are really intertwined and cobbled together in the hope that we never uncover this difference. Like, we never recognize that there is this other way of looking at our energy and time, whether we are, no matter what body we're in. Um, if we treat our bodies like machines, then the system thrives. But we're really seeing over and over again how this can really hurt both men and women in the long run in terms of burnout, stress levels, sicknesses, just our own mental health. It's pretty easy to see how too much emphasis being put on this 24-hour repeatable cycle can be really damaging.
Yeah, the goal is to keep you so focused on the work, and also, then your mental health and your physical health declines. You don't have time to think about these things, like all you're just trying to survive. And that's the whole point. If you found out that there was a whole new way to live, then, the power would be overthrown. And they're scared of that.
Right.
So especially, how many of you have ever felt guilty for not being able to be productive all the time? Like,
Mm.
especially as a business owner. Yeah, all the time. Like, having an off day doesn't feel like an option sometimes, especially in the beginning. I feel like you can, I mean, if you have the privilege to be able to support yourself in that way, and set up your life so that you can have some flexibility in having an off day. But a lot of people can't do that. And we feel guilty for, maybe you wake up and you're just not feeling so mentally well or able to tackle the day. And you just have to power through it anyway because you have to go to work. And if I know in office culture, if you take a personal day, it's like a whole thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
our lack of education about our own cycles keeps us in that cycle of disempowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we both probably see this not only as business owners, but obviously um, in our own work as well, and like the ways and how insidious this kind of way of thinking, or prioritization of way of thinking, I guess, can happen. I know for me, and kind of like you just said, as someone who works with small businesses but also runs her own small business, there's kind of this like, um, what's that? What was that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? Inception. There's like an inception of observances happening here, but like so many small business owners are stuck in this cycle, kind of like you were talking about, where like there's like this feeling of guilt if you haven't been productive enough, or you're like hustling like so hard and at a rate that's really not sustainable, and then you're burning out, right, due to this overwhelming narrative in our culture about like bootstrapping. um
Ugh, I hate that word.
Same so much. I feel like I like just shivered when I said it. Like basically we're told, right? Like if you work the hardest, you will see results. You will end up on top. So we just get up and we grind. We just push ourselves to the limit. We prioritize our business and making money over our mental health, our physical health, the sometimes like the well-being of our employees or, the planet if we have, you know, we're all making an impact on the world around us. And I just like to think like I don't again, Jeff Bezos is just going to be like the punching bag for this for me. But like, I don't think that Jeff Bezos works harder than, say, a single mom working two jobs. Like, our system has been built not only to encourage us to exploit our own bodies in the name of productivity, but often to exploit others to really succeed, to really like be at the top, to be a millionaire, a billionaire, a trillionaire, whatever it is. This is so deeply ingrained in our culture and the way that we talk about businesses that it really actually inspired me to start my business because I was working um, with so many of these founders and people who really wanted to grow. And they recognize that this isn't the way that they want to work. Like, they don't want to burn themselves out. They want to find some semblance of balance between like their work life and their personal life. But there just isn't an alternative narrative out there. It's like, you either are having this like this is how you structure your day to like be a winner conversation, or there's a lot of podcasts about building your business out there that I think are summarized by saying like, well, I like had this idea and I worked pretty hard and then somebody gave me a fuck ton of money and now I just sold it for like $100 million or whatever.
Yeah, and
um
just to add to that, it's really hard to start a business.
yeah.
It's not for everyone to be able to do it from scratch with
Oh
limited capital. And what you don't see behind the scenes is that they have a husband or parents that are funding them. So those people you hear on the podcast when they're like, yeah, I worked really hard and I got a bunch of money. But also, I started because my family was super rich and you'll burn yourself out if you try to do what I did?
yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that like for a lot of people, regardless of even their situation, they're just like not sure. Maybe they're already in business or maybe they are thinking about starting one, but they're seeing all this narrative, like all these, even just like stupid memes that are like get up and grind and like stuff like that. It's just not, I don't think that that's a sustainable way to structure your life. Like, you're gonna have periods and seasons and phases of a lot of hustle and a lot of action, and then you're gonna need to take the step back to recuperate and analyze and be thoughtful about your next move, or you're just gonna be on this constant treadmill, which I don't think, I mean, I certainly don't want to be on forever. I don't know about anyone else, but it hasn't felt good for me in the past. And so, actually by working with cycles and seasons in terms of the creative and growth process, results happen in the same vein. Like, you'll still see growth, you'll see financial success, satisfaction, fulfillment, but you'll have way less stress and guilt and burnout. I think that all comes from this like idea of a scarcity mindset that we only have 24 hours, right? Like, when you're told that everything has to be done in this really short period of time, it requires us to be at peak performance every single day. And that's just not possible. We're human beings, we're not machines. And so if we can take a longer approach, whether that means following a moon cycle or following a menstrual cycle, or just kind of understanding your own creative process as, a creative individual, we can honor what's best for us and stay connected with what's best for our employees and our community. And naturally, we're stepping more into abundance mindset because we know we have all of, a longer lead time or more resources or the support of people around us. And I mean, I obviously love what I do, but it's really cool to see that that mindset shift because it's so lacking.
Yeah, and I bet that's really satisfying and like revolutionary to the business owners that you work with to make that shift too. I hate the word grind so much.
Oh my God,
It's
same.
such
It
an
just makes me think of
aggressive.
middle school dances.
Oh my God. It's such an aggressive word, and we love using aggressive, like masculine language for all
Yeah,
this stuff. And like I said, it's the opposite of nurturing, which is what we're hopefully striving for.
right.
And you mentioned, I mean, burnout, which is really prevalent and something we've both experienced, I know. But
Oh,
there's
yes.
there's so many ways that following or following patriarchal standards of living messes up our health.
Mm.
And so the first thing I just wanted to mention here is, I mean, here I go on my soapbox.
Oh my God,
um,
get on it, girl. I'll step down so you can step on up.
but the first thing is just, suppressing emotions, which is you're not supposed to have emotions in patriarchal society. Women are taught to sort of overregulate their
Mm.
emotions. We can't be too happy because it's weird, or there's things that are of major interest to women that are seen as silly and unworthy. So that's where, like, I think that's where the term guilty pleasure comes from, because we have to hide our enjoyment because men will make fun of us.
Oh my
Or
God, 100%.
yeah, or we're not allowed to be angry because it's unbecoming of a woman, or we can't be sad because it's self-indulgent. And back to office culture, it's definitely huge there, where you're not allowed to express your emotions. God forbid you cry in the office. I remember maybe like 2012, I had an office. I literally, it was in an unfinished basement of a retail store.
Oh
I
my
was
God.
doing marketing for them. This is previous career, but I just remember, like, the owner was super, or the owner's husband was super, very into this masculine energy, and
Oof.
he would constantly try to get me to do like all of these things. And when I would need assistance and try to call him, like, he would yell at me. He'd be like, you need to manage this yourself, and like it would make me cry, and I was so afraid of crying there.
Oh,
So
horrible.
I know, but when you show emotion in an office, there's all these politics around it. So,
Yeah.
that's one thing, but it's also even more pronounced, not just in the office, but anywhere for women of color. That there's the angry black woman trope. They also don't want to make white people feel uncomfortable, because that's a whole thing with any type of politics, which is a whole other conversation. But it's stressful. And then there's emotional labor, everything from being designated as the secretary or the maid, dealing with mansplaining, like all that fun
Yep.
stuff, to heavier things like having to handle sexism and racism and the intersections of all that, and educating why those things are important. Doing that education is really huge emotional labor. And
Yeah.
this is all exhausting to me just talking about it.
No,
So,
absolutely. And I think that what just came up for me too is like the cycle we can get trapped in of like you're trying to be, you know, call people in and educate them on the topics you were just talking about. And even if you're using your most plain business focused voice, it's like just by bringing up those topics of like emotional labor or sexism or racism or any of those kind of things, like it's often seen when it's coming from a woman as like as either aggressive or like you're being dramatic, or
mm,
like no matter, even if you're using your best you know emotionless demeanor, it's still just like interpreted that way, I guess.
yeah. Calm down. Stop being so emotional. Don't be
Yeah.
hysterical. You're taking this too seriously. It's just a joke. Oh my
Oh
God.
my God.
That actually reminds me, there's a woman on TikTok who I cannot remember her name right now, but I'll put it in the show notes. I believe, I mean, maybe she's a psychologist. I haven't looked too much into it, but she is really good at communication and showing you how to deal with things like this, and how
Mm.
to teach people how to treat you, basically. And she shows, like, she does conversations of herself back and forth, like being the person saying dumb things, and like how you can respond to them. And I think
Oh,
I think that's really helpful account. I mean, there's lots of dumb videos on TikTok, but there's also really great ones like that. So, yeah.
That's
But
awesome.
anyway, on top of all of those stressful things, we also have the pressure of diet culture, which is something I deal with a lot with clients.
Mm,
Chronic dieting and the diet industry telling us we can't trust our bodies, we're doing it all wrong. We have to be teeny tiny bodies, have tiny emotions, fitting, just like being it's about shrinking women down
yes.
to a more palatable size. And that's really stressful, especially because something like over 95% of diets for intentional weight loss don't work. So
Mm,
there's this added stress thinking that we're doing something wrong. And
mm-hmm.
then all of this comes down to emotional eating if we don't have any other coping mechanisms. There's a whole thing about emotional eating where it can be good sometimes, but it's if it's your main source of pleasure, then there's an issue, and that's a common coping mechanism for people. And this has another cascade effect on your body image, on your hormonal health. um, and like I said, diet culture, it's just a product of the patriarchy, because it's really all about fitting the male gaze.
Mm,
And all of these diets, all of these things that we try to follow to shrink our bodies, these things don't take into account our cycle phases.
mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned earlier, during your cycle, your energy changes, your metabolism changes, but these diet plans, or, they don't take into account your calorie needs that change throughout your cycle, or, they're trying to get you to do high intensity workouts every single day for weeks on end. And, your body just doesn't want that.
Yeah.
Would you have experience with that?
Oh my God. Imagine if I was just like, no.
You've somehow escaped it.
No, I mean, not to like get super personal, and I know we're going to talk about some of our favorite resources later, but I deal with a chronic illness that is triggered by, years and years of having like a hormonal imbalance that I just didn't recognize or didn't even understand because I didn't know how my own body worked. And I've definitely gone through plenty of fad diets. I've had, years of intense stress at work that made me lose a ton of weight, and then I almost like was mad about being happy because I put weight back on, like I mean I've been through a ringer. And I think that, I've always considered myself a feminist and have obviously made my work all about this kind of stuff, but for me, exactly what you're talking about personally, like the learning about what my body actually has to do every month in order for me to have a period is like been absolutely revolutionary, and has, I've almost gone through stages of grief trying to, you know, reconcile that I'm a 30-year-old woman and I'm like just now realizing like how my body works, and that like yeah, all those high intensity workouts like weren't right for me at certain times of the month. And yeah, I just like wish I could go back and tell my high school self like everything I know now. I certainly don't have it down to an art, but like it's not you. Like you're not broken has been like like wild.
Well, what you're saying, that you're 30 years old and you didn't know this stuff, yeah, that's very common. None of us, like most people
Totally.
don't know that stuff because we're not taught it, because it's not seen as important.
Mhm.
I know both of us recently read In the Flow, and there's a whole section on, how a lot of research is focused on women either in a certain phase, like the lowest hormone phase of their cycle, or
Mhm.
postmenopausal women, because the hormonal fluctuations just make it too difficult. And it's like, well, this is just
Sorry.
part of our life. and
Right.
and so going back to the diet culture stuff, so this is part of it. We get all these biohacking tips, like the Dave Asprey and like all these male biohackers. All of their advice is not applicable to women because the research has not been done on women. And if women are included, like I said, it's at the phase of their life or their cycle where they're most like men because it's just easier. And
Right.
women, this is a fun, not so fun fact. Women weren't even required to be in research studies until the fucking 90s. Can you believe that? Like the 1990s, not 1890s.
I'm like, not the 1890s. Yeah, that's wild. You guys, think
Unbelievable.
about that. Think about the pharmaceutical industry, like even as it exists now, because the requirements, even still for research, are so low. I mean, and that's just male, female. Like, let's not even talk about like, that's not even including the difference between different races and things like that being included and studied in the same way that like white men are studied to sell these drugs to people of all genders and colors. Like it's so problematic. I can't. I could combust.
So we don't learn about these things, and it's not our fault. And, it's a lot of the time, it's not even a lot of the medical community's fault because it's what they're being taught. And it goes back to what's allowed to be researched. And so, the biased research means there's biased doctors, and whether, I mean, not intentional, but that's just how the education is right now. There's missing knowledge. So there's there's a lot going on there, and what we talk about in following your cycle and knowing your body can be really helpful for you to be your own advocate at the doctor's office because you know your body best. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so many times that people have gone to the doctor, myself included, where you're just kind of dismissed because no one knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do your research and you know when your body is feeling off, when you're more in tune with it. So that's why we sort of advocate for following your cycle in that respect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be really helpful to even just have that information because again, just from my personal experience, it's like before you just feel like you have to be like armed with knowledge, like I'm in this phase, this phase triggers symptoms more than this other phase. Like that information can be really helpful to lead your doctor to the correct solution because the antibiotic that maybe they would prescribe to every other man who walked into the office might not be the right solution for you. It can be not to say that that's always the case, but like it's just really, really helpful to know your body because, like Kristen was saying, women's bodies haven't been studied to the same effect that men have. So we are sort of asked to do it ourselves. So do it, we shall.
Add
Like
to add to
this.
that labor.
Yeah, exactly. Like, fine. But now I mean, I basically like bust in the door to my doctor pretty much every time I go in now. And I'm like, let me tell you something about what I've found. But it does also, in the same way that you were talking about body image, it's like I didn't even realize when I started doing this kind of research. And obviously, Kristen is much more involved with her clients one on one and doing this work. And I really only have myself as a test subject. Um, but I've found even just like my mental health to feel like once I've started to understand my own cycles and, what foods support me, what exercise supports me, what creative processes are like most aligned with where my body is at, it has allowed me to really release so much anxiety and stress about like not being enough or like not understanding why some days I feel amazing and can take 50 calls in a row and have a bunch of really creative ideas, and by the end of the day I'm not even tired, and other days I'm like, oh my gosh, I just like need to rest. And I've always associated that with like there's something wrong with me. And I think that learning about just simple like cycles and the different ways to kind of look at the movement of energy through our bodies through a period of time is like it really takes some of that like individual struggle, for me it has anyways, away.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying before about how, that low energy, maybe you think it feels like depression or, not
Yes.
to take away from people who do have depression, but, if you don't know that that's what your body is going through and you can feel like, oh, why don't I feel like doing anything today? Why don't I have the energy? And you start to get down on yourself for that. And it's just so much different when you understand that, that's just what's happening with your cycle right now. You have lower energy, and when you're honoring that, it just feels so much different and it feels more empowering.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I'd be curious to hear kind of like, I mean, I'm happy to share too, but how you how you really integrate like planning your life around cycles because, I mean, I would yell about this forever. I think there's a I think there's a lot to be, angry and sort of almost grief stricken about. But now that we do have some of our base knowledge and get to work with these things in our businesses, how do you personally, Kristen, work with either your own cycle or moon cycle or just kind of take that more feminine planning perspective?
Yeah, so I do I ideally I want to follow the menstrual cycle the way that we're talking about, but I'm on the birth control pill right now. And I've been trying to, or I've been wanting to get off of that for a little while now, but I'm also dealing with some like mystery pelvic pain that my doctors are like, I don't know,
Oh
they're just like shuffling me around. So
my God.
another thing for doctors not having the knowledge, but my doctor was like, don't get off it now. You don't want to introduce another variable. So
Hmm.
I've been wanting to get off of it because when you are on the pill, you don't have a real cycle. And so you don't get the same kind of benefits as for following the phases, but you can still follow them. And I do. And I do notice a difference between, just going and just, kind of winging it versus following. So I follow the phases of the moon for energy
Mm,
levels. And that's a way that you can do it if you are in hormonal birth control, or trans non-binary people can do this too. That can help you connect to a feminine energy to follow the phases of the moon.
mm,
So by following those phases, I'm talking about, in terms of planning, in terms of exercise, in terms of projects that I'm doing for work, um, also just personal self-care stuff, rituals, and I sort of plan things out by what that moon energy is good for. And
mhm.
I actually just posted a blog on this. If you guys want to go to my site, it's goodwitchkitchen.net. Following the moon, or what was it, using moon energy to create a better flow in your life. So that's how I do it because I'm on the pill. With clients, I help them eat for their cycle. So, like I said, different energy changes, caloric needs. I don't really focus on calories, but that your metabolism changes, and also the different phases of your cycle have different needs. There's different things going on in your body that you want to eat to support. So I help clients in that way. And I also help them, track their phases, whether it's through the moon or through their menstrual cycle. So that's what I do there. Also, in terms of self care, I think earlier episode, I said my favorite form of self care in the new moon phase was saying no. So that would be
Yes.
during the menstrual phase. And that's a big thing that I've had to get confidence in doing. But it's really now that, when you feel empowered, when you're following the phases in this way and you're empowered to do things that support those phases, it's okay to say no, and you feel confident in doing that, which is like an introvert's dream. And you're not afraid to say no and say, you know what, I'm doing this for self-care and I don't have to explain myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I think that that's really great. And I mean, I love that you found a way. And I think this is like really helpful because obviously I think there are a lot of people who are on birth control to kind of still be able to look to the moon and find these superpowers and like really give yourself that longer 28-day, well, with the moon, 29 and a half day cycle to kind of, yeah, get to know those different phases and how they show up for you and how that way of living can feel. I think it's so simple in some ways. Like I always say to people, like you're not going to be doing anything that you don't already do. Like you're not adding more to your plate. You're just kind of categorizing and planning in this different way. And I think that people are usually, for the most part, pretty blown away by the difference that that makes. And I can say from experience, because Kristen has helped me with my own hormonal and cyclical eating and exercise, it is really such a game changer. And it, again, there's like, it further develops your relationship like with food, even too, you know, where there's not really like a food that's like bad necessarily. It's just like in support of what your body needs to do right now or not. And that's been really helpful for me as I've, again, just been forced, I guess, to
Maybe
practice.
maybe once I am actually able to get off the pill, I can sort of like document my journey for you
Oh my
guys.
God. Yeah. Oh, that would be good. I'd be curious. But yeah, I mean, I think that to that point, like I have since starting this journey really like I plan everything according to my cycle. It's like probably a little more intense than it needs to be, but and again, it's taken me like maybe 2.5 years to get to this point, but like really my to-do list, my self-care, meetings, my business launches, my workload is really all associated with kind of like where I'm at. It's just, again, like as I've been trying to manage this issue has become really prevalent for me and really helpful. So, you know, if something works, I tend to stick with it. And so, you know, the main things I do are I track my period, obviously. The Flow app is really great if you want something on your phone that has a little bit more information about each part of your cycle. My favorite my favorite thing about that app is you can sync your partner. Do you
Yes.
do that?
No, I
Yeah.
haven't done it, but I know that that's a feature.
Yeah, it's so funny. I signed up for it a couple of years ago and have been using it. And like, yeah, it'll send my husband emails being like, okay, she's like really not in the mood for this kind of thing. Like, you should be the one deciding what's for dinner because she's not going to have the bandwidth to do it. And I'm like, oh my God, damn, Flow app, thank you.
It's
Like,
great to have an advocate, even if it is a robot.
it's so nice. Yeah, he's always like, oh, I got an email from your period app today. Like, oh, cool. Um, so yeah, that is really helpful because I like to have that kind of information and have it tracked in like one place. But I journal every single day and I write what day of my cycle I'm on, just like I do the date. You know, I'll write what the day is and what day I'm on. I'm not on birth control, so I find it really helpful to kind of just be able to look back and note how long certain cycles were, how I was feeling on certain days, what was on my mind, etc. And honestly, like I'm just a chronic overscheduler. So understanding like where my energetic limits are and what my superpowers are on a given week has been really, really helpful for me to kind of take a longer view and look at maybe a month's time instead of just like week over week, because if I keep that time period too short, I really drop into scarcity and I'm like, "Oh my god, I have to get everything done this week," when that might not be in service to me or my work or the people I have to work with. So yeah, I like to think about honoring both masculine and feminine cycles and energy by having kind of structure to my days while keeping space for what I cyclically need. So that usually involves the food that I'm eating, the exercise that I'm doing, the self care practices. And, you know, I've kind of noticed, you know, day to day what my energy is like. I'm a way better worker in the morning than I am in the afternoon, you know? Um, but then I always build in time every day to kind of just check in with my body and check in with myself and make sure that it's getting what it needs, because I found that to just be really, really helpful and take a lot of the question marks around why do I feel this way or what do I need, like off my plate. I'm in constant recalibration, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so for people who don't own businesses and
Sure.
who have to submit to patriarchal timing,
Ugh, I
um,
feel you.
how do you or how would you suggest maybe handling standing appointments or obligations that maybe you have to do weekly, or things that don't match your cycle or phase.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important because, like, there's no way that by doing this work, everyone around us is going to be doing it as well. Like, there is, like we said at the beginning, there's not really, this isn't really a binary conversation of like, it's either feminine energy or it's masculine. Like, there needs to be this harmony, right? So for me, like, if there is something that feels like it's immovable, or it's recurring. I have a lot of standing meetings week over week. I really make sure that I'm scheduling a little bit less around that if it's, more work than I feel like I have the energy for, and definitely making sure that I have, built in a significant amount of self care. I like to recommend to people, regardless of, again, if they're a business owner or not, that like integrating like cyclical hours. So whether that's like in the morning or in the evening before or after work, just like having an hour set aside of time where you're just doing something that's more caring and aligned with your cycle. Because if you can give yourself 1 out of 24 hours to honor your natural cycle instead of what's expected of you, like that alone is pretty special, and it really does make a difference, even though the perfectionists in all of us, who are also spawned by patriarchy, tell us that, like, oh no, it has to be 100% perfect or it's nothing. I really like to just kind of recommend setting aside that time for yourself and sort of labeling it like, this is my cyclical time. So, that can be meal prep, that can be journaling, that can be going for a walk. It can be like doing some brainstorming for a project that's like further down the pipeline, but you're like, okay, I'm going to have to do that presentation on a week that is not aligned with, being my most magnetic self. So I'm going to do as much prep in the time that is, to, kind of superpower it. It's really like, it takes a while to transition from that 24-hour cycle to the longer month long um, timeline, but it really, you find interesting workarounds, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's like anything else with any new habits. It takes some time to get used to and really integrate it. And I agree with or planning around it, or planning around things that you can't change, and just to make them feel better, to just add a little bit of extra self-care if you can in a week that isn't really aligned. Um, yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it. So, some other ways, I know we've talked a lot about connecting and how you can connect to your feminine side, but we have a bunch of different suggestions for you. We are book nerds, so we already talked about Woman Code and In the Flow by Alyssa Vitti. Those
Mm-hmm.
are, I feel like those are foundational books. Would you say the same?
Oh my God, yeah, they'll change your life.
Yeah, and so on top of that, for period related things, we have Period Power by Maisie Hill. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? I just bought it, so I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally aligned with the Women Code and In the Flow by Elisa Vitti. I really liked Period Power because I felt like it was a little bit, it definitely has a lot of science to it, but it was a little bit more integrated in like how it a lot each phase aligns with your creative process and what you kind of need emotionally and energetically during each phase, which at the time that I read Period Power, Elisa Vitti had only published Woman Code, which is much more, to me, like scientifically dense. um, and Period Power felt like a really amazing introduction to how, how your cycle and your different phases can affect, yeah, things like work, things like relationships, things like, your creative process. And that just for me and the people that I work with felt super revolutionary, and it didn't feel as dense to me.
Yeah, Woman Code and In the Flow go over sort of um, menstrual phase only and kind of touch on how it affects different areas of your life, but it sounds like Period Power really expands on that.
Yeah. I really liked it. I thought it was a really good introduction.
Yeah, and another health related one that I really love working with is Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich, I think you pronounce her last
Mm.
name. Um, it's not it's not something that everyone really needs to follow, but definitely if you are in that diet culture spiral, chronic dieting, intuitive eating is a really great framework to follow, and just to learn how to start listening to your body and understanding what works and what doesn't. Um, and I
Yeah.
could do a whole episode on that, but I think that's a really great place to start if you're looking to get out of that cycle and really start connecting. And it's another way to train your intuition, like we talked about last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion. I should put that on my list. And in terms of tracking, I think that's like a big question that I get a lot. I know not everyone wants to just kind of write it down in a notebook somewhere. So, we mentioned the Flow app, which is also, again, by Elisa Vitti. Just like follow her everywhere you can follow her. She's amazing. Her company is incredible. So that app for period tracking is really awesome. And then there's also an app called Moon Phases that you can use to track the phases of the moon, obviously, in case you're, interested in incorporating that into your practice, or if you're on birth control or are trans or binary, or are just a man who's interested in figuring out another way of being. Welcome if you are listening and you've gotten this far. I also use moongiant.com just as like if you're on your desktop and need like a quick what the hell is the moon doing today. I find that to be like a pretty quick, easy resource.
Yeah, there's lots of different great apps. The Moon Phases is the one that I use, and there's also the app Moon, which is
Oh,
really, there is nothing more to it than just showing you the moon phase. You can look up different moon phases for different dates, so if you want to plan ahead or if you want to see what the phase was on a certain date. But otherwise, that's there's like nothing else to it. But that's, I mean, hey, if that's all you're looking for, it's
hey,
perfect.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. And I think, just to leave you guys with like beyond just tracking and research, like some things that you can really start integrating. I'm sure, if you're buying any of those books or tracking your period or the moon, you'll have a lot to pull from. But I also really suggest that if you are a person who is either getting into this, way of thinking or has also felt grief or just general sadness about how our society has been built up around one particular type of energy or, any of the things that we've talked about, if they've enraged you or made you sad, like donate or volunteer with organizations who support reproductive justice, who are fighting for more inclusive sexual education curriculums, who are supplying menstrual products to women in need. Any cause that supports women, non binary folks, like they need your support and money. And that is how the system that we are under not only changes just in terms of the workforce, but really it starts with education, in my opinion. So I really just want to suggest you know, I know we're running a little bit long, so I don't want to get too into the weeds, but I'll do some research for us communally and we can put some organizations in the show notes if anyone's interested in that.
That's definitely a great way to get involved and to honor that nurturing energy that we've been talking about. Is really just supporting people in need. And if you are a witch, if you identify as a witch, witches are advocates for the powerless and for those in need. So
Mm.
this is a really great way to put that into practice. And like Janine said, we'll add some of those things to, or some of those organizations to the show notes. And yeah, we'd love for you to offer some suggestions as well. If there's anything in addition to what we included there that you think is important, you can always let us know, and we'll spread the word.
Yes, ma'am. Whew.
I
How are you feeling? Did that feel?
feel like this is a little bit of a heavier episode, but
Yeah.
so why don't we share a little bit about what positive things we're doing to honor our cycles and our energy this week?
Yes. Um, Maybe TMI, but we're friends here, guys. We've made it through 3 episodes. I am in my luteal phase of my cycle, so at the end of it, so I'm feeling pretty restful. And I have a bunch, actually, I'm staring at them right now, of tabs open of like very low key restorative yoga that I'll be doing after we record. So that's one thing I'm doing is adapting my exercise to meet my body where it's at rather than, you know, trying to run in 90-degree heat. It's really hot here today. I'm just slowing down and doing some chill yoga for me. What about you?
Yeah, anything that doesn't require a ton of movement right now because it is 90 degrees. It's like
Yeah,
I'm like sweating in my closet right now as we record
same.
this. Yeah, for me, it's the same. It's just winding down a little bit these last couple weeks. I've been really trying to just take it easy and not schedule too much because, um, it's this sort of cycle of creation that we talked about. Like I've been just like go, go, go for quite a while now. And now that I launched a product a couple of weeks ago, and now that that's over, it's like I need a rest. So
Yeah,
I just made sure that I just didn't schedule much. Like I have my normal client calls, but outside of that, I scheduled nothing. Whereas normally I'm scheduling like every hour of my day, figuring out what I'm going to work on. Because I mean, I think we've talked about this before is that I love organization and I love
totally.
anything that soothes my Virgo soul. But right now, what soothes me is just not doing anything.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So I have a couple more days of that, and then next week got to get back to it, just because capitalism. But yeah.
Totally.
So yeah, I'd also love for anyone listening to let us know what positive things you're doing to support yourself this week too. And if you do want to share that with us, you can find us anywhere on social media. We're everywhere. Our favorite place is Instagram at It's Just a Phase Pod. And if you want to reach out with any comments, questions, suggestions for future episodes, you can email us at it's just a phase pod at gmail.com. And if you liked what you heard today, you can feel free to lovingly leave an iTunes review for us because it makes us feel good and it also helps other people find our show too. So we'd really appreciate that.
Yes. Thank you guys so much. I wish you all cyclical health and just smash the patriarchy vibes.
Yeah.
We can do both.
Down with the patriarchy. Right. All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.